This lesson, I picked this lesson tonight because we're towards the end of our section on special relationships, and we're talking about, I'm sorry, it's lesson 236. Sorry about that. If anybody needs a copy of the lesson for tonight, just raise your hand. Anybody need one? Well, you've all got your books. Look how good you are. This lesson, the reason I picked it is because what the Course is always telling us is what we think is going on in the world is not really what's going on in the world. There's really, the Course has one problem. The thought that we could be separate from God. And there's one solution, the memory of that, the remembrance of the truth. And that is to remember love, to remember God, to remember our oneness. And we find that in all of our relationships with one another. As much as the thought of separation can be played out in our special relationships, the thought of unity and our doorway to God can be played out in every holy relationship. Every special relationship, as the Course says, every relationship, as the Course says, starts out as special because it's within this world, but it can be transformed into a holy relationship based on our desire to invite the presence of God into it and for it to turn into unity. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that's why I picked this lesson tonight, was so we could kind of get a running start into the end of that text section. It says, I rule my mind, which I alone must rule. And we'd all go, sure, that makes sense, right? Of course, I have to be in charge of this thing. But how often are you in charge of this thing? How often are you controlling your thoughts or letting your thoughts kind of run ahead of truth or letting your emotions or letting a thought that pops into your head take you down a rabbit hole that maybe you hadn't intended to go down? So the Course really is about telling us you got to start looking at where your thoughts are taking you. And don't just be satisfied with these little thoughts that pop up and then you run after them. I think a good example of that is many times at night before you go to sleep or when you're starting to go to sleep or maybe you kind of wake up from a sleep and you'll have a thought that comes into your head. Do you ever have that? Like maybe it's a fearful thought or I got to do something thought. And it's hard to go back to sleep, isn't it? Because all you do is think about that thought. Now, also, what I do when that happens, it's like, this is distracting me from getting the rest I need so that I can handle this thought in the morning. But if we don't look at that thought and say, no, I don't want to handle you now. I'm going to look at you tomorrow morning when I am rested, when I am clear, when I am able to handle it. And I want to get the sleep I need right now to be able to handle this in a productive way. So Holy Spirit, you take it. I'm going back to sleep. Now, that's taken me years to get to the place where I don't let those thoughts bother me. Now, I'm still tempted, and especially at night, to want to dwell on those thoughts. How about you? Right? I'm still tempted to dwell on those thoughts, but I realize that if I look at that thought, and that's not denying the thought or our need to take care of the thought, it's just saying, I'm not going to deal with you right now. And those emergency thoughts, those angry thoughts, those fearful thoughts, they want attention right now. They're like a little child having a temper tantrum. Look at me now. Fix me now. I want to have you, deal with me now. And that is never the time you should deal with those things. You do not deal with a child when they're throwing a tantrum. You get them calmed down. You take them out of that experience or out of that environment, and you calm them down, or you let them get some rest, or you give them something to eat, and things are going to calm down if you do that. Well, the same thing is true for us. We need to calm it down. We need to recognize what's going on in those moments. And that's why this lesson is very good for us to kind of realize we have to say to the temper tantrums of our little minds, we need to calm it down. Okay, so it says here, I have a kingdom, I must rule, and that is your mind. You are in control of your thoughts. Not the world out there, not the news, not the newspaper, not events that are taking place, not circumstances that are taking place. You are in control of how you will handle this circumstance and situation. I have a kingdom, I must rule. At times it says, it does not seem I am its king at all. We all get that, right? It seems to triumph over me and tell me what to think and what to do and what to feel. We all have felt that. It says, and yet, this is your ancient learning. Your ancient learning has told you that the world triumphs over you. It tells you what to think. It tells you what to do. It tells you what to feel. If you look at the life of Jesus, the world seemed to triumph, didn't it? Here he was. He was betrayed. He was, given a chance in front of the Romans. The Romans gave him a chance in front of his own people. What do you want? We'll free Jesus or Barabbas, and the world triumphed over him. It appeared to, right? It seemed to. And yet, what do we know about the message of Jesus? He did not share that perception. So what it's telling us is, even in the world that seems to triumph over us, we have control of our minds. And because we have control of them, we have all power, not the world. And here's the interesting thing about A Course in Miracles. It tells us that the world is nothing more than a projection of your mind. So if your mind has been given service to the Holy Spirit, the world in which you live will not be a world that triumphs over, but a world of peace and healing. And that is what I believe Jesus saw in the midst of other people's perceptions that appeared another way, that he did not experience that. Have you ever been that way, where you've been in a circumstance or situation and you feel peace and people around you come up and go, wow, that was wild. How'd you handle that? Well, I didn't perceive it the way you perceived it. It was not the same thing. I remember one time, this is when I was I got involved with politics. Don't ask me why. I don't even know how I got there. I was working in Hollywood. I had been an actress for a while. I'd been an agent. And then, through A Course in Miracles, I was invited to be on the governor's earthquake task force for preparedness. So I was under the preparedness part, and I was getting some public service announcements done by some Hollywood celebrities. And so that's kind of how I got involved with it. But at one point in time, we had this big, doodad thing where all the committees came together. And there was this dinner, and after dinner, the guy who was running it said, why don't you get up and just talk about public information? And I thought, oh my God, I don't have anything prepared. I don't know what I'm going to do. He says, you'll do fine. And so I got up and I just thought, well, Holy Spirit, I'm going to step back and let you lead the way. Thank God he let me finish my dinner before he told me I was going to do this, because I would not have any idea. I couldn't have eaten. I would have been, Anyway, I got up and I started talking about these ideas of what public information for earthquake preparedness is really about. Certainly you have to do all the specific things that need to get out there, the public service announcements, the brochures, and all the other things. But most important thing is that what we have to get past is this idea that we do not talk to our neighbors, that we do not talk to each other, because the most important thing that's going to take place in an earthquake is that we're going to kind of be on our own. And if your house, say, for example, if you know how to turn off your gas, but your neighbor doesn't know how to turn off his gas or their gas, and their house explodes, well, your house will explode too. Your house will burn. So unless we are reaching out to each other in community, we don't have any hope of surviving. We could be on our own for 3 days. I mean, that's basically what they say. And in some cases, even longer. Well, I went through some of these things and how important it was to have unity and joining and community. Well, at the end of it was very short, the end of my little dissertation, whatever I said, I can't even remember. This guy got up and he raised his hand. I thought, oh, good, there's a question. This is so much better. The guy got up and he says, I think that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And he just ripped me a new one. And I just sort of stood there and I said, well, thanks for sharing. And I said, I really don't have anything more to say, but thank you anyway. And I sat down, and this guy who told me to speak came up to me and said, oh my God. He said, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I really am. And he says, just so you know, that person in that committee never wants to talk to anybody. The most closed off, alienated person I've ever met. But the funny thing was, I felt at peace in the midst of what had just happened. I did not share the perception that this guy had, or the person sitting, the guy next to me had. I felt okay. And I still to this day felt, how in the world did that happen? How did I feel okay? I was humiliated, in essence, in the world's terms, in front of all of these men, mainly men in these committees, and yet I did not share that perception. And I know it's because the Holy Spirit was using me to get to that guy and for him to almost see for himself that is not, he's going to have to learn how to reach out. He's going to have to learn how to join. So to me, that's what this is telling us. We have a feeling that the world is triumphing over us, and yet it says it has been given us to allow our minds to serve whatever purpose I perceive in it. My mind can only serve. I am going to be of service to the Holy Spirit. How's that going to look? How is that going to look? I don't know. But he's going to use us in such a way that will not harm us, that will not hurt us, that will not humiliate us, but will serve us. And that's what I think Jesus, he even said, look, let's not emulate Jesus. We don't have to make that last useless journey that he said to the cross. He says, you do not have to crucify yourself any longer. But he said, I used a very extreme example to show you that you no longer have to do this. You have a mind. You have the power to overcome the limitations of your life by turning your mind over to the power that is within you now, that Christ consciousness, that, truth, that Holy Spirit. And that's what this lesson is saying. So I give my mind, I give its service to the Holy Spirit to employ as he sees fit. And thus I direct my mind, which I alone can rule. And thus I set it free to do the will of God. So I am going to rule my mind by giving it to the Holy Spirit. I'm not going to rule my mind by saying, I know what I should do in every circumstance, in every situation. I'm in control. I am going to rule my mind by saying, I do not know what anything including this is for, and so I do not know how to respond to it, and I will not use my own past learning as the light to guide me now. I'm going to let a power that knows everyone's past, everyone's future, my past, my future, to guide me now. That's what this lesson is about. You are in control of your mind. Watch your mind. Watch it. Don't let it dwell in the valley of the shadow of death and destruction and fear and attack. Give it to him who can show you that even in the midst of the valley of the shadow of death, there is only light and there is only life and there is only love. And that's what we're asked to do. Be aware. Be aware of this little mind that likes to take these little traveling road things off in weird directions. Bring it back to the truth.